over and over and over again for the last 15 years. We need to move to and transition to a clean energy economy as fast as we can, but we need to do it with a comprehensive plan in place, and that's the direction that I want to lead as the next governor.
I'm extremely proud of my environmental record as mayor of the city of St. Paul. For 12 years, I've led the fight to make St. Paul an international leader on the issue of climate change. We've done things like going to single-serve recycling to make sure that we're increasing the amount of waste that we take out of the waste stream. We have gone to organized collection because we know that will be a significant reduction in our carbon footprint and make our trash collection more efficient. We've gone to projects across the city of St. Paul to reduce our energy consumption, and we have led that fight. But I think one of the things I'm concerned about in this race is that we will square up against each other, or worse, get in a circular firing squad and not have a conversation about some real important issues facing our state. And Line 3 is one of them. I absolutely 100% know that we have to get to a carbon-free economy by 2050. But that's not something that we can blink on. That's not something that we can just turn on. It's a process that we will get there. And it's a transition off of carbon fuel. But right now we have a line that is leaking and poisoning our land. And it is critically important that we go into that line and we figure out how to make it safe. We all as Democrats stand up and we say, you know what, I cannot believe that these Republicans don't listen to the science on climate change. But then we are guilty of the exact same thing. Let's let science lead us. Let's ask the question, can we do this safely? Can we do it in a way that respects tribal lands and tribal sovereignty? Can we do it in a way that doesn't destroy rice beds? Can we do it in a way that doesn't destroy the headwaters of the Mississippi River? We can't be afraid of science. We can't be afraid to ask that question. And we can't be afraid to talk about jobs in the state of Minnesota. Absolutely, we will transition into a carbon-free economy, but that won't happen overnight. It will happen because we have led the way, but we're also not afraid to ask the questions. We have a real concern here, because we're going to have two choices between a governor in the state of Minnesota who's a Democrat that cares about the environment and jobs, or a Republican who cares about jobs but doesn't give a damn about the environment. We as Democrats have to ask the right questions and not be afraid what the answer is.
Well, I have some great news for Paul and for everybody else. We've got the plan. It's called the Minnesota Power Plan. We don't need oil pipelines. They don't belong in water-sensitive areas. They don't belong on tribal lands. And we can change everything that we're doing with my Minnesota Power Plan. And it is endorsed by both Bill McKibben and Paul Douglas, the meteorologist, who's a Republican climate change evangelist, because we have to do this. The future depends on it. It's the right thing to do. And economically, we can create between 70,000 and 250,000 good-paying jobs, and they tend to be union jobs. And my plan is going to require Minnesota workers. Yes, we can do this. So the 2 years free, we can actually train people in these jobs, the clean energy economy jobs. And we're going to empower Minnesotans to take charge of their energy. Don't you want free energy forever? The wind and the sun? So we take control of our energy future. We take advantage of reducing our energy costs. Government doesn't get to do this very often. And so this is a really exciting opportunity. So we don't have to think about it. We don't have to go in circles about it. We don't have to toe the line on pipelines. Because there's a lot of, oh, maybe we need pipelines. We don't need pipelines. We can change what we are doing, and we can have the next generation of good-paying jobs for lots and lots of Minnesotans. And this is the greatest opportunity we've had in a decade. And when animals are washing out of the zoo in Duluth, we must admit we have a problem. And you can look at places around the world where roads are washing out, bridges are washing out. We have climate refugees. We must address this. And this actually is one of the biggest things that we can do if we want world peace. And I want world peace. Thank you.
Well, to be clear, I took a vote against Line 3 and I'm opposed to it because of where it's sited. I was up in International Falls earlier this year and met with a group of people over coffee, and there's a couple that lives at the border crossing where trains bring fuel, fossil fuels across from Canada into Minnesota. And the train bed that they come across that body of water has some breakage in the pillars underneath, and they're trying to fix those. We're in a transition. We're moving more quickly to renewable energy than we anticipated when we passed the renewable energy standard. And we have to move that standard up and continue to drive ourselves in that direction. And we have to make sure that we're protecting our strategic asset of water as we move in that direction. Wind and water and solar are the next sources of energy for us. And when we build that here in the state of Minnesota, I'm going to make sure that those are Minnesota jobs and they are labor jobs. Because not in every case in Minnesota are those jobs going to Minnesota workers covered by union contracts. And we need to make sure that that happens. Minnesota is moving more quickly. They're moving more quickly, and the Commerce Department has called into question the need for the capacity in that pipeline. So let's push ourselves toward that renewable energy economy, to those good jobs that will build our future so that we protect our climate, because we need to protect our climate. We're a state that grows things. And if we can't grow things in the state, because the climate has changed significantly, it's going to impact our economy and our way of life. We have to look out for that too.
This question is good because it is the two parts of it. It is the climate change piece. I'm very proud to have voted for cap and trade in the United States Congress. Very proud we got $100 million in renewable energy into the Farm Bill. Very proud to make sure we did conservation compliance as part of the Farm Bill. No federal dollars for what you're doing unless it meets the standards that we need. Those things are things that we can and should be doing. Southern Minnesota, the first district, is the 6th largest wind producer. They're biofuels and 2nd and 3rd generation biofuels moving forward. The state of Minnesota, at Camp Ripley, has the largest solar field of a military installation. They are carbon neutral up there, and they are net zeroing. So if there's a natural emergency or a man-made emergency in Minnesota, the Minnesota National Guard and all the first responders are able to do that. Underneath that solar field is the state's largest pollinator field. There's things that we can do. This issue of pipelines, again, Chris is right. There's going to have to be a glide path. There's 2.4 million miles of pipeline in this country. 75,000 of it is oil pipeline. What I do know is the last thing we need to do is move oil by trains, making all kinds of hazardous and leaking pipelines are an issue, but it does go back to science and it does go back to process. The process is what matters. We cannot allow ourselves to be taken out of that. That's why my running mate and the other indigenous women in the State House led the fight to say no line free. There's treaties, and you have to follow those to make sure. Talking about process. We sent in to fucking all of them and made that case. What this is about is building those coalitions and bringing people to the table. Before we get into this situation, we need to sit down and, as your governor, making sure that everybody understands what the rules are, where the safeguards there. If the science says it's not safe enough to do it, we do not do it. But we have to be reasonable and understand we're going to be moving products and hazardous products. We should do so as safely as possible with good Minnesota jobs in a manner that follows a process and has safeguards in place. That's the way we make sure we don't tell people up there their jobs don't matter, what they're saying doesn't matter, and they're not looking at just short-term jobs. They're looking at ways that feed their family, that do their way of life. We can get this right. The next governor is going to have to tackle these tough issues. I'm ready to do it.
Okay, next question will start with Representative Paul Thiessen. Seeing the burst in turnout in Minneapolis and St. Paul under ranked choice voting and a more diverse slate of candidates, do you support ranked choice voting statewide?
Well, I've always voted for ranked choice voting. I voted to put it into, to allow it to be authorized in Minneapolis and St. Paul. I think it did fundamentally change how our elections are run here. And I'm very open and interested in understanding how we can implement that at the statewide level and educate people enough at the statewide level to make that happen. Because at the end of the day, we could talk about all the stuff we want to talk about up here tonight. If we don't have a fair election system, if we don't have a democracy that works, if we don't elect people that really believe in democracy, we're not going to win any of these battles. So ranked choice voting is an important discussion and a place to start. But we need fundamental campaign finance reform. We need to overturn Citizens United. We need to bring transparency into the state in our elections and our campaign systems. And we need to have publicly financed campaigns, quite frankly. And I think probably everybody at this table would love if we got to that. We also need to push back against some of the Republican ideas, like voter ID, like making excluding people from voter rolls, because that is plain and simple discriminatory. It's racial bias. That is the only thing that is about. We need to restore civics education into our education system again, so people really understand how our government works. We need to make sure that we are lifting up the kind of politics that includes people, that brings all people's voice to the table. We need to run our politics the same way that we want to govern. And I think, again, ranked choice voting can get us there. But at the end of the day, We are not gonna change our election system. We are not gonna change the way we do this unless we're bold about what we believe and we're clear about what our values are, and we go and talk to voters very clearly about that we are against what's happening to African Americans and people of color and indigenous people in this state, that we are against what's happening to the very poor in this state, that we are going to stand up to the concentrated economic and political power of the very few who are distorting our political system, destroying our economy for most people, and not allowing us to become the state that we imagine we could become. If we do that, we will win elections.
If there's one thing I absolutely hate, it's admitting I was wrong. And I kind of have to admit I was wrong on this one. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't opposed to ranked choice voting when it was first proposed, and when we went through it, I really kind of stayed neutral on it. Because I wasn't convinced that it was going to kind of change how people reacted in their elections. I wasn't convinced that it was going to reduce the animosity in our political elections, and I wasn't sure it was going to drive out totals of voters. But if you look at what happened in the city of St. Paul, if you look at what happened in the city of Minneapolis this last election, we had almost record turnout for municipal elections. We had tens of thousands of more voters coming out this last time than had ever come out before. They came out because they could go out to the poll and not hold their nose and vote for someone they disagreed with. But they had multiple choices that they could say, this is the person that I want to support. And they came out in droves. And the elections, by and large, were very civil. In the city of St. Paul, we had an incredibly civil election until the police federation came in and started throwing out racist crap across the city of St. Paul. But even then, people understood we still had to come together because you were still trying to appeal to your second and third choice votes. So the fact of the matter is, I was skeptical about ranked choice voting, but it is very clear based on what happened this last election in the city of St. Paul and the city of Minneapolis. It worked well, and we should push it forward in the state of Minnesota.
So I believe I was the first elected official to endorse ranked choice voting years ago, because I thought it was a really great idea. And I thought, why not? Let's try this. And we have tried it. Now, I will say, the first Minneapolis election, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys had so many candidates. And then I started to wonder, is that a good idea? I was wondering, how confusing would it be to be a voter? And I wasn't a voter in Minneapolis, but I was like, holy smokes. And I think Minneapolis changed some things and made the bar a little bit higher to run for office. And this last time was fascinating to watch in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. I watched very carefully and closely. I would love to see the data. Thinking about implementing it on a statewide level, I want to see more data from the local level. I think we're still getting a handle on it. But I think it's a good idea as long as, because somebody said to me, you don't have to rank your vote. Because I thought, what if you don't want to or you don't know how? I mean, even as a candidate, I kind of wonder, how do you do this? How do you understand what's happening? So anyway, I would like to continue to see how it's rolling out and talk to more voters about their experience with it, because I've asked people, and some people say, I just don't rank it. And some people say, I do rank it and I like it. So I want to continue to do that at the local level before we implement it at the state level and make sure we've got a strong handle on it, because at the end of the day, I don't want anybody disenfranchised from voting. That's always got to be our first and foremost aim when it comes to voting. But voting is one of our greatest things that we get to do as citizens of our democracy, and we don't ever want to stifle that. Thanks.
There was ranked choice voting used in my first endorsing convention, and that ranked choice voting ran parallel to the way that we were voting, and it turned out the very same way. We used it in St. Paul, we used it in Minneapolis, and I think it's serving us well. And I'm open to the idea of doing it statewide, but we got to work with Minnesotans so they understand it too, because it is kind of complicated, and there are people that are worried that they're losing something like that. We've got to show them that it's working and that we're getting good results for the people of Minnesota. But I have spent a lot of my time in the last 11 years door knocking across the state of Minnesota. And one thing that I have noticed that I am exceptionally concerned about is the outside money coming into our elections. When I see 80 or 90 pieces of mail being delivered to the mailboxes of people in Minnesota in the last 2 months of an election, when they come to the door with a pile of mail and say, I can't tell anymore what's going on here, I don't know who's telling me what, because the disclaimers aren't clear and some of that dark money is filtering into those elections. It is pushing people away from the ballot box, and that is a threat to our democracy. So whether we pursue ranked choice voting is one way, but I think it is time for us to recognize that our job, the antidote to that big money, is us. And we have to stand up again for what we believe in our elections. We have to stand up because that's why people vote for us, when we offer a different vision. And then we have to organize. There is nothing that will beat organizing on the ground, having conversations with the people of Minnesota, and bringing them into a vision and into the ballot box. That is how we win an election, but that is how we govern in the state of Minnesota as well. So yes to ranked choice voting if Minnesotans are ready to do that, but there's a lot more that we need to do to make sure that we're governing with the progressive vision for the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Well, I'm supportive of anything that's more inclusive to voting, and ranked choice voting is something I think you've heard it, expand that, get it out there, but this is much greater than that. This ability to make sure that everyone has the right to vote, making sure we restore the Voting Rights Act, make sure that there, make sure in the State House here in Minnesota, restore the Vote Act. If you serve time or you do a crime and you pay your time, you should come back off of that. Why are we voting on a Tuesday in November, making it difficult for people who are working, a national holiday or a Saturday, making sure we have mail-in votes, making sure everybody's registered to vote when they can, making sure we're expanding it, and it is a shame. It is a shame and a disgrace to this nation that we have 50% voting. We lead in this state, and I guarantee you, this election in 2018, we're going to have record turnout. We're going to get people out there. We're going to turn them out. But we need to push back on this notion that there's people voting illegally everywhere. We have laws in place for that. The problem is we make it more difficult for people to vote. We make it more difficult for them to participate in this. We make it more difficult for them to feel that they're part of it. That's how we started this. If ranked choice voting is a piece of that puzzle, that's exactly what we should do. But this as a nation, we should set a goal on this, and we have sat back and watched them try and demonize and undermine our system. We watch them, and we're going to need Facebook and everyone else to make sure they're policing the things that are coming in. This is a threat to us. Everything from making sure there's a paper ballot everywhere we go. But the thing I would tell you why 2018 is so important, and why having the best ideas is not going to be good enough. We have to win this election because we know what they do when they win. 2020 is a redistricting year. If you want to know how you fix the United States Congress, you make voting easier for people. You make citizens have the right to do the redistricting or non-partisan judicial redistricting, and you can't find we would not have tax bill. We would probably have single-payer health care. We have deficits going down, and we have affordable education. It is the system that's stopping that from happening. Let's take that message to our neighbors and make it happen. If ranked choice is a piece of that entire puzzle, then we should look at it and try and make it happen.
It's hard to be last on this one because I think we all pretty much agree. And some of what we really agree on here is the threats to our democracy that we're seeing because of the big money in our election system. And we just saw this with the Republican tax bill, where it's really clear that most Americans don't want that bill. And why are they doing it anyway? Because their donors want it. That's why they're doing it. So this is a very direct example of how big money is hurting our democracy. And there really is a threat right now. I mean, it really does feel to me like we're in a war. We've got to win, and part of that is getting people to use the power that we have. And the way we make change in this country, the way we can really use our power, at least one of the big ways, is by voting. But too often, people don't feel like they have anything to vote for. And so they don't bother. They think it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and a lot of times it really does seem like it, doesn't it? So I think ranked choice voting is a really good idea. I think we've seen that proof of concept now in Minneapolis and St. Paul, that the system's getting better. Like some of my colleagues here, you know, I'm not sure we're ready to go full out right now because we want to make sure that it works. We don't want to do anything that even further erodes trust in government. We want people to feel confident, but giving people more to vote for is a really good thing. I think it's really good to give people more choices. Let them come and vote for something they really want to vote for instead of the lesser of two evils. That's really an important concept. So yeah, I am very much open to that. I've never had the opportunity to actually vote in a ranked choice election, but I think that's something that I would really look forward to, and I think that it's a concept that really has a lot of promise for the state. And the idea that also, I want to echo some of what I've heard here about making sure that people have the opportunity to vote. Felon voting, absolutely. We've got to restore the vote when people are able to get out there and get to the polls. It's easier for people to vote. Anything we can do to make it easier to vote will be a good thing.
We have time just for one more question before we go into closing statements. So the final question, we'll start with Mayor Chris Coleman, and then when we do the closing statements, we'll do the opposite direction. So we'll start with Chris and then we'll have Rebecca do the last closing statement. So the final question, it is 2030 and you have served 2 terms as governor of Minnesota. What are people saying about your legacy? What are the biggest concrete accomplishments?
Well, I think the first thing they're going to say is, God, he's old. But they're going to say that Minnesota is a state that works for everyone. They're going to say that Minnesota is a compassionate state. That whether you are a person that is here for 4 or 5 generations, your family has been here for 4 or 5 generations, or whether you have just come to the state of Minnesota, fleeing a war-torn country in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, an immigrant from South or Central America, Minnesota works for you. Minnesota works for you because we care for your children, because we provide health insurance for all, because we understand that everything begins with a good education, that we have dealt head-on with the issues of structural racism and implicit bias, and haven't been afraid to have those honest conversations, that we've rebuilt our infrastructure, that we haven't been afraid to make the investments that were necessary for us to have good roads and good bridges, but also great public transportation systems, great bike paths, and great infrastructure across the state of Minnesota. There are no small plans in governing. They said at one point, Daniel Burnham, a famous architect, said, make no small plans, for they have no power to stir the imagination. We have to imagine what all Minnesota can be. We have to make grand and bold plans about a Minnesota that works for everyone, that leads the nation in environmental quality, that leads the nation in fairness, that leads the nation in education. When we dream big and we dream together, we can accomplish anything that we want. That has been the history of the state of Minnesota. I hope to have that opportunity to have 8 years as mayor, because I've had 12 years as mayor. 8 years as governor. And 8 years as governor will be plenty. But ladies and gentlemen, we can make Minnesota the best state in the nation. It has been there before. We can get there again.
This is a really fun question to contemplate, but my dream after 2 terms as governor, with the help, your help in making sure we change everything, is that we've lifted our fellow Minnesotans out of intergenerational poverty. And more than half of our small businesses are owned by minorities. That, I mean, I could just go on and on, because we want equality of opportunity for everybody, that we drove the clean energy economy, and we are on the cutting edge, and we are doing the research and development and the manufacturing, and we're innovating for the world. Shouldn't we be doing this? So there's all these extraordinary things we can do. And you know what else we'll have done? Repopulated some of our greater Minnesota communities. And that they were able to reopen some of their schools. Because really, at the end of the day, you know, depopulation is one of their biggest issues. And it's really hard for them to attract young families when they closed and consolidated their schools, and they haven't been able to keep their Main Street businesses open, and they don't have childcare. So there's all these things that we can do, and all these extraordinary opportunities. You know what else I want to see after my 2 years of an auto administration? That we're doing biomanufacturing, that we're growing crops in our state, and then we're manufacturing here. It's grown in Minnesota, made in Minnesota, that we're doing all kinds of work around sustainability. And we can do this. We can absolutely do this. And that we have done right by this next generation. And as your governor, whenever it comes to an important decision, and I still do this today as state auditor, when I'm weighing something, I always think about the next generation, and I will always err on what's best for the next generation as your governor. And I thank you for this time tonight. I know we're going to closing statement, but I think we have a lot of fun and we got to work together. Thank you.
It'll be 2026 when I retire from that job. And I hope that at the end of that, we stay together, look at what we accomplished together. Minnesotans have always been people who believe that we can take on big issues and solve them, and we have, over and over again. And we have some in front of us, whether it is racial disparities and structural racism, a baby boom generation getting ready to leave the workforce shortages all over the state of Minnesota. We have challenges. And right now, our politics is not really about tackling those challenges at all. It's about winning the next election and running down the other side. And what's getting lost in that is our future and what we can accomplish together. Healthcare that we can count on, strong public schools, closing the achievement gap for kids across the state of Minnesota, making sure that we can support ourselves and our families with our work. Right? The basic things that build our state. But I want, at the end of this, for people to say, she kept her word. She said she was going to stick with the people of Minnesota, and she did. She didn't hold herself up inside that Capitol. She stayed in the state of Minnesota with the people of Minnesota, and she brought their voices into the Capitol so we could build that bright future that I believe in together. I know that there will be lots of forces that are coming at us. We know that's happening. Lots of attacks on us. And the